If I can't break bread with you, not just make bread with you, then I don't know. I don't know that I'm interested at this stage. I like to think of myself as a maverick, right? I like to think of myself as somebody who breaks the mold, who's always thinking outside of the box, challenging themselves, functioning at a very high level, because that's something I take pride in. For me, it's not really about being a mogul, because you could have tripped into that. It's really about being a maverick, somebody who is challenging the status quo. I never know what I'm capable of. I never know what I'm going to tackle from one given day to the next. All I know is that whatever it is, I'm going to kill it. I was born and raised in New York, Upper West Side of Manhattan. I'm first generation Haitian American. My mom raised us all as a single mother primarily. I have one brief memory of my father. He wasn't really around much growing up. She raised my sisters and later on had our younger brother. I really didn't know that we lacked for anything or didn't have what anyone else had because we had clothes on our backs, we had food to eat every day, we had a roof over our head. Growing up, my life was filled with love. The advantages of having been raised by a single mom for me personally is that I grew up thinking that everything was possible, anything was possible. As a woman, as a young woman coming up in life, that I never had to rely on anyone, and it made me extremely independent. I remember my mother being at our school all the time, and I would think that, oh, she's very heavily involved. But it was really because she was working there, and she was cleaning the school on off hours so that we could afford to go there. That definitely shaped who I am today as a woman of color, as a business person, as an entrepreneur. That spirit of figure it out and make it happen by any means necessary, definitely something that I got from my single mother. Radio City Music Hall would have these programs around the holidays where they would hire pages. I went there at first seasonally, and that grew into a more permanent position, but it was kind of my first connection to entertainment. I was a guest relations director, which basically meant that I was an usher. I sat people to their seats, I showed them around the theater, I worked backstage for productions, but that gave me a front row seat to the backstage workings of a production. I found myself fascinated by all of the pieces, all of the moving parts, all of the people that were involved with what we ended up seeing on stage. And I remember being fascinated as I would watch the shows by all of those different parts, right? I wasn't even watching the show anymore. I was thinking about what it took to make that thing happen. The rehearsal time and the fittings and the glam and the conceptualizing, and I was hooked. I was reeled in by that. I really just kind of stumbled into talent management. I think I was in my mid-20s. I went to take a dance class at Broadway Dance Center. After taking the class, as I was leaving, I heard this pounding music. I peeked into the window there, and I saw these women, these beautiful women in the room, and they had the microphones and the mic stands, and there was a class of people behind them. It turned out to be a class called Stage Moves. They would literally teach you how to perform, how to project, how to command the audience. It was about showmanship, staging. I started doing that with them, and that led to me working with talent, which eventually opened the door to management. I knew that I enjoyed that element of entertainment, had never really thought about doing anything behind the scenes. I needed to educate myself about what this job was, about what this industry was about, so that I could bring my full self to it. And that's exactly what I set about doing, learning about the music industry from the ground up. I was doing artist development, and one of the groups that I was working with happened to be produced by these guys out of Brooklyn called the Trackmasters. I think they saw the way that I was moving with the group, which was really a function of trying to get them to my rehearsals on time, and they approached me and asked me if I wanted to manage. I didn't even know what that meant. I knew that it must have had something to do with being organized and, helping them get what they needed done. But of course, there's so much more to that, but that was kind of my entry. I'm definitely one of those people that believes that the universe offers opportunities that you need to be open and willing to jump through the hoop and take advantage of. And although I was skeptical, because I wasn't quite sure what the job would entail, I realized that it was an opportunity, and so I took it. Then I started working with this young rapper named Chiali, and she was managed by a young guy by the name of LIGHTY. As I was working and learning, he was a resource for me, somebody that I would go to for questions. And he also started giving me work with his talent. I worked with Black Sheep and Foxy Brown, and Chris came to me and said, hey, I am moving over to Def Jam. I'm going to really focus in on Violator Records. And when he started Violator Records, I went over to help him. It was an opportunity to start something. So I hung a shingle and we formed Violator Management. And that's when it was born. Figuring out the landscape of managing hip hop artists at a time where hip hop was expanding beyond and becoming this kind of global phenomenon with all of this mainstream viability. And we were going from, managing this talent that were huge locally, but taking them into those other arenas. There was a huge learning curve, and we were also kind of young people learning how to build a business. I was tasked with building and managing the acts under the Violator Management umbrella. We had Tribe Called Quest, Busta was one of our clients, Mobb Deep, LL, Warren G. The talent trusted me because Chris trusted me. Chris and I had a long-standing friendship. I was kind of like his right-hand sister, and they saw, how he was entrusting me with helping him. I don't think they hesitated because they knew that he would never put their careers, their lives, in the hands of somebody that he didn't trust implicitly. And then it was about, doing the work. I rolled up my sleeves. They saw that I was passionate. They saw that I cared. They saw that I was there 24/7 for whatever it is that they needed, because I believed in a 360 approach to management. It isn't about just coming in and clocking in when there's a project to be worked and then clocking my commission. It really is about building that relationship and being there for the talent across the board, so that when they had to get in front of the camera, when they had to get in the booth behind that microphone, they knew that everything else in their lives was handled in a way that they could do what they had to do. That was our partnership. The hardest thing about being a woman in the music industry back then was being taken seriously. It was a time where boys clubs ruled. It was, rough and tumble. All of the action took place in the club at night, where if you're there that late at night, you're there for a couple of things, and business ain't one of them. The guys moved around, they moved around hard. I remember there was one incident where I was out at the club with Chris, and we got into the car and he was a little bit frazzled, and I remember him ducking my head down and busting shots over my head. It was a really, really rough time in hip hop. I transitioned from music into television in 2005 when I did a show with Missy Elliott called The Road to Stardom. And I did that with UPN. I remember we had an idea for a show. It was an elimination show, a competition show. And it was brought to us for Missy, who I managed at the time. And it was my first experience with producing. I want to be able to understand all of the pieces so that I can build a bigger, better piece. And I remember being involved with everything from initial creative to final execution. Here was another genre, another industry, another lane that I could go into and lend my special skills to, right? My ability to put pieces of things together and my ability to understand what is appealing to an audience. That's when I got bit by the bug, because we did this show and it was fun, and it also pushed me in front of the camera because I did the eliminations for that show. But it got me to thinking about what else is out there, not only for my clients, but for myself, because I really enjoyed the focusing on something that had more to do with my ideas and my creativity than just helping my talent. In 2008, I really felt that the industry was changing. The music industry was changing tremendously. And if I was going to make a move, if I was going to take a leap of faith and do something different, that was gonna be the time. I started putting the pieces together to manage my own life and to do something different for myself. And that's when Mon Ami Productions was born. The name Mon Ami, it comes from two places. One, of course, it's a play on my name, Mona, but it's also a little bit of a nod to my French, Haitian background, you know, Mon Ami. It means my friend. And after having spent so many years as a violator, right, which I was so very proud of, but it was definitely rough and tumble, eat what you kill, every man for himself, may the strongest survive, which honed me and definitely sharpened my skills, but I was at a different place in my life and I wanted to do business differently. I wanted to go to sleep at night with both eyes closed, knowing that I was doing what I enjoyed in an environment with people that I was enjoying doing it with, and I was really going to do business in a much different way. And it became a philosophy for me, for the company. If I can't break bread with you, not just make bread with you, then I don't know. I don't know that I'm interested at this stage. The creation of Love and Hip Hop. I don't know if it was a creation as much as it was an evolution. The show started out as a show about Jim Jones, and Yandy Smith, who at the time was managing Jim. And prior to that, Yandy started out as my intern, fresh out of college. And she was one of those people that you knew was going to do something with her life. She had the right attitude, she was smart, she was focused and driven, and as much as I put her through the ringer, the paces, she just did not care. She hung in there. After a certain point, it was time for her to go out into the world, and one of the clients that she picked up was Jim Jones. One of the projects that they had was a reality show about Jim. And they had sold the project to VH1 and had been in development with it for a couple of years. And they were really struggling with figuring out what the show was and how they were going to bring something or put something together that was gonna work for the network. I'd met the network executive, Jim ACKERMAN, as I was navigating Hollywood, and we'd always stayed in touch. And when Yandy brought the project in, I reached out to Jim and told him that there was an opportunity that I would love to be involved in to help shape the project and bring it to life. At the time, Jim, didn't really want to do a reality show. He was going through a lot in his life, and there were all of these female ensemble casts happening. You saw the Housewives of Atlanta and other cities that the Housewives franchise had grown into, and I knew from my years in the music industry that this world of being a woman in the hip hop game, of dating the men in this world, was like nothing most people had ever experienced or seen. And I had witnessed it firsthand. These women were bold, they were audacious, but they were also dealing with things in their personal relationship that most people couldn't even fathom. And I, discussed with Jim this idea of broadening out the cast. What if we took a look at who were the people organically in Chrissy's circle? Who were some of the other women that she knew? What you saw when the show launched was this show that was about the world and the women in the world and the relationships that they navigated and the dynamics of their own interpersonal relationships. The men may have been the names that allowed the show to have some measure of recognition, but the women were the stories and the heart that connected the audience to the show and the franchise. We had no idea what we were going to accomplish when we embarked on the journey, but we certainly knew when we watched that first fully assembled rough cut that we had something special, right? Not only in the stories that we were telling, the world that we were pulling the curtain back on, but also the way that we were telling those stories. It was one of the first times that you saw black skin look rich and beautiful, right? Because I don't think anyone ever really paid attention to the need for different lighting and different lenses because of the way the light refracted on the skin tone. So we took a lot of care with that so that it looked beautiful and as beautiful as all of the other shows that we were watching on television. Cardi B was a massive, massive success for Love and Hip Hop. And I'd never take credit for her career. I wouldn't say that I, was responsible in any way. I'll say that I had a hand in providing the tool, the mechanism, the platform by which her natural God-given talent was exposed to the world. As a music manager for many years, a big part of my thinking was if I see someone with talent, if I see something, a person or a project that I can have a hand in making great, making better, bringing to fruition, that's always, for me, a primary directive. It's just who I am in my DNA. Cardi, seeing how super talented she was and how focused she was and what she wanted out of her career, it was, for me, a no-brainer, a natural thing to say, how do we leverage that? How do we give her the opportunity to leverage that via this show? And for somebody who is as talented as she is and as committed to having her career, this is the way to do it. How are you gonna engage the fan? How are you going to turn them into a consumer so that when you release that music, they're there, ready, willing, and, excited to support your career? So she's an example of when it goes right. No way in a million years could I ever have imagined the impact that it would have, the success that it would have. 13 years later, we'd still be going strong, still be evolving, still be releasing new shows and new spin-offs. To the network's credit, they stuck with it. Because even though the show didn't rate that well in the beginning, it certainly had a strong hold on the conversation. It was the, topic of conversation at the office the next day, or people were, getting together to watch the show or getting on social media and talking about the storylines and the clothing and the hairstyles and the cast members. So we knew we had something that was resonating, but no way would I ever say we had any idea that it would be the massive success that it's been. When I think about the ratings and the accolades and us being the highest rated reality television show and having that stronghold for such a very long time, I have to say, in the moment, I didn't really think about it because it was always about keeping my head down, keeping my nose to the grindstone, looking straight ahead at what was in front of me. But if I have to stop and take a minute and think about that impact, it's an incredibly proud feeling. The show is often judged and criticized for not portraying the best of us. I have so many thoughts around that. I just think that there's a space for everyone when you're telling stories because we are not monolithic. Who determines which stories get to be told? Who determines who is television worthy? It implies that we are not all worthy. We don't all deserve to have a platform or to hear our stories or to share our stories. This is about a very specific world. It's a show about a specific group of women who are living lives that I say all the time, I don't know that I could live. There are other women out there who identify with them. We see those same stories on all kinds of shows, right? It's the same stories that they tell on, Housewives of Orange County. It's the same stories that you see on any of these other shows. I think it's the fact that these stories are being, told about a group of women in hip hop, Black women specifically, that they're held to a different standard. You cannot control what people are gonna say, certainly not what they're gonna think. They're gonna have their opinions, and like an asshole, everyone's got one, but it doesn't mean it is who I am. It doesn't mean it defines what the show represents and who the cast on the show are. So I embrace all of it right? Not ashamed of any of it. Shortly after, Love and Hip Hop took off, unfortunately, Chris LIGHTY passed away. When I think about how I've honored his legacy, I'd have to say it's in going hard every single day, because that was just something we did. When we were starting Violator, it was this no holds barred, go hard every single day attitude that he infused into all of us. He was an incredible leader in that way. And I've taken that with me, and I've, infuse that into my own company culture now, where living life to the fullest, giving 150,000% every single day, killing the ant with a sledgehammer. That is all Chris LIGHTY. It's how I live my life, it's how I run my business, but it's also the spirit that Violator was born from, and it's something that I carry with me forever. Violator for life. I feel a tremendous sense of obligation because the opportunities that I've been afforded were not necessarily always there for the women before me. And because I'm now in this space where I'm doing the things that I'm doing, there is an obligation that I have to the women who are coming after me, the women who are standing alongside and beside me, who have their own aspirations and goals, that I continue to kind of beat down the door and forge a path forward so that they can go even further and do even more than I've been able to do. That's the only way that we progress as people. They should be tossing you up over them. So that's kind of the way that I think. That's the philosophy that I have. Because I just think that, if I don't do it, there's not necessarily, this world isn't designed for us, right? As much as there have been huge strides for people of color, it just isn't designed for our success. It's just systemically, that's not the way this, United States of America has been built. And so when we get to a space and we get to a place where we can bring others in, then that is our obligation, right? Because that is the only way that we as a collective are going to elevate and find ourselves in different places. I probably have, and I say this with no joke, one of the most supportive families ever. And I know everybody's gonna say that about their family, but listen, I know that I am a lot. I'm a lot in a lot of senses. I'm a force to be reckoned with. I'm a unicorn and I'm different, but I'm also taxing and I'm exacting and I'm exhausting. And I know this because I'm constantly thinking and I constantly want more and I'm constantly pushing myself, which means that I spend a lot of time in pursuit. And my family, I don't want to say they've suffered, but they've made sacrifices. And I recognize that. My husband is my rock, but he also rolls with me, literally, with whatever it is, whatever whim comes to mind, whatever my latest conquest is, whatever the newest mountain, the hill that I want to climb, he's right there with me. And, my kids just, for years, having either tagged along with me or not had me around. Those were major sacrifices that they made. So I always credit my family, and that's why I'm always so specific about people saying my full name. A lot of people know me as Mona Scott from back in the music industry, but the person who started Mona Me Productions, the person who for the last 12 years has built this from the ground up, that's Mona Scott Young. Because this has been a family business in the truest sense of the word.